Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima, and I'm here checking out the wonderful 101 Remastered. I'm playing this on PC. Notably, I'm not actually able to buy this yet. I had to get a friend of mine in the United States to buy it for me, because for some reason they just decided to slowly limp out the release in other territories on Steam, where the game is digital only, days after the American release. For some reason. Why the fuck they would do that, I have no idea. And if I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, the game is making me bloody miserable. And there's a few reasons for that, which we will get into after we talk about everything else. It's your basic Super Sentai style of story, where you've got a bunch of civilians who turn into heroes via the usage of government technology, and you try and defend the Earth from robot and alien invaders. It's pretty simple, really. The rest of it is really meant to be conveyed via its charm and style, which is admittedly probably the most stylish thing that Platinum Games have ever done. And it's also got a bit of humor and a bit of, like, self-referential nonsense going on now and again, including the fact that the guy who wields the sword, his voice actor, he's literally Raiden's voice actor from Metal Gear. That's Quentin Flynn. So, you know, just a little thing like that here and there does give the game a little bit of a laugh, but some of it is honestly just kind of obnoxious. Like the entirety of Wonder Pink's just general character is just so sharp to the point I cut myself on it a bit too much. The cutscenes are still well done. The voice acting is fine, but it's in things like these cutscenes where you realize that this game is definitely not remastered. There's a few instances where you can very easily tell how this isn't so much remastered as it is just a relatively low quality port, and the one major thing that I noticed right away is the textures. If you're paying pretty close attention to the textures that are going on here, and I'm not even talking about things that are like off in the background and not a particularly big deal. I'm talking about things that are right up in your face, like this absolutely awful depth of field effect going on around the globe in front of us. Some of the textures on the Wonders, like, objects that they're holding, like back when Wonder Green was holding that hamburger. And even their skin can look really pixelated when you get really up close to it. It's just kind of unpleasant. It's pretty obvious that they've just taken this straight from the Wii U, maybe applied a filter or two to the just overall look of the game, and then just put it out. It looks awfully aliased, even with anti-aliasing. Actually, does this game have anti-aliasing? I have no idea. It's only got not much in the way of graphics settings. It's got like VSync effects and a couple of other minor ones off to the side. There's not much in the way of customization going on here. And for those of you who are really paying attention, you might be surprised to learn about the fact that the frame limiter is also kind of screwed up in this port, unless you're using the silent patch, which fixes it so that the game doesn't get more unstable as it goes on. I am playing with that patch because I knew about it ahead of time, thank God. But yeah, even by default, the longer you play this game, the more unstable the frame rate's going to get, just due to a programming bug. Not pleasant, I will say that. You know what's also not pleasant? Everything about the way this game plays. Now, I will admit that I've never been particularly good at Platinum games. In fact, I've never gone along with them at all. It's kind of bizarre just how, like, I think I'd like these sorts of games. Every single time I see a Platinum game, you know, a character action game with a lot of moves, a lot of things to do, a lot of enemies to beat the crap out of, and, well, yeah, that just kind of sounds fun in and of itself, but there's always some weird problems that get in the way of me really enjoying them. With Metal Gear Rising, it was the absolutely horrific tutorial that does not teach you how to parry properly. I got all the way up to Senator Armstrong, not knowing what the hell I was meant to be doing in that regard, and a lot of other people did too. That's why that game is still not very fondly remembered. There's Bayonetta, which is just, honestly, it's relatively basic. I've never been able to get much more than an hour in it without getting bored. Then there's Nier Automata, which is just so bloody dull that I find myself not able to enjoy it either, and it's got a few weird things going on. Now, this game is a direct port from the Wii U, and as I assume at least some of us would know, I probably shouldn't say we all know, but as some of us know, the Wii U is a dual-screen console. You hold the controller, which has a screen on it, with your hands, and then there's a second screen, which is your TV that you look at, and you swap between the two as necessary. Here's the thing though. They did not remove this aspect from the PC, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and I believe that's also a Switch port. So I can't help but think to myself, why they went the way that they did. Because there are a few things that you might think you might need, like the ability to swap the leader unit without having to do a specific gesture with the Wonderliner. There's needing to look at the radar, which has all of the enemies on it, although the radar is such short range that I can't help but think to myself why they even bothered to have it in the first place. And the only way that you can see what's going on this screen is by having a semi-transparent screen covering up something like 25% of your screen at minimum. You can turn the transparency up and down in the options menu, but it's either really hard to see, or it gets in the way of seeing what's behind it. And again, it takes up a good quarter of your screen. You'll see it later on in this footage. This obviously isn't being played at the same time it's being commentated. So, no matter what you do with this other screen that it needs to put on, it's a gigantic pain in the ass to use. And there are multiple situations in the game where you need to swap to another area, and this other area is like a smaller area inside of a bigger area, and you need to be swapping between both screens at once, and they make the screen, not the second screen, not transparent. So you can see what's going on in both areas at the same time, but it's honestly just so distracting that I'd rather they got rid of those parts of the games entirely or just relegate them to cutscenes, because trying to look back and forth and trying to deal with the controls that this game brings along, while at the same time trying to deal with just all of this going on at once with two different screens, a control scheme that actually changes depending on what you're doing, in terms of like needing to grab a ship's controls and then fly the ship around, and then you get knocked off and you have to focus on getting control of the ship again, just things like that. It makes the control scheme way too complicated, and it really doesn't help because the control scheme for this game is a real pain in the neck. I will admit that they tried, and it gets close to being playable, but it just doesn't hit it for multiple reasons. So, the main way that you play this game is via drawing things with the Wonderliner, which is basically just their replacement for the pen. I believe you can also control the game this way on the Wii U, but frankly, after having played with the right control stick being the Wonderliner for 3 hours, there is no goddamn way I would take the control stick over the Wii U's tablet any day of the week. But yes, you gotta draw out shapes, and those shapes become your weapons. So you draw a circle, it turns into a fist. You draw a straight line, it turns into a sword. You draw a upward shape that goes to the left or right, it turns into a gun, etc., etc. But then you get more complicated shapes, like a whip, which needs to be drawn in an up and down curve. And then you get a hammer that you need to draw by drawing upwards in a line and then drawing a circle. And then you press a button at the end, it spawns the weapon. The problem is that this system is way too sensitive and favors particular shapes way more than it should. The amount of times I've drawn a whip trying to get the hammer out is absolutely ridiculous. The amount of times I've tried to draw a glider, which is a certain special shape that you need to do in order to fly across small gaps, is ridiculous because I've managed to do it by accident 3 or 4 times while I'm in a fight that needs literally anything else. And then while I'm trying to draw a glider, the couple of times that the game makes you draw a glider, I can't for the life of me stop drawing fists. It's so inaccurate and so unpleasant to use that I don't know how it managed to get past any sort of quality assurance, because it's just so inaccurate to the point where I'm incredibly frustrated. Also, this is a bad show of confidence on my part, where I'm thinking that I have to draw the glider to get over this gap, but instead it just blows me off to my death multiple times. What do I have to do? I have to draw a bridge, but the game doesn't motion me to draw a bridge. I mean, I get that it's kind of telling me not to go for the glider because the winds are heavy, But then, yeah, just after the second time I fell down the hole, it's like, oh, you idiot, you have to draw a bridge. Telegraphing! Another thing that this game does absolutely terribly, because there are tons of different enemies in this game with a huge amount of variety of attacks, and it's almost never told to you whether or not something can be deflected using the Unite Guts, which is mapped on your left trigger and is basically your block, and also your parry, or whether something has to be dodged using the right trigger. And trying to figure out which is unbelievably frustrating, if you couldn't tell, because you can get a bonus if you manage to Unite Guts at the right time. You can also get a bonus if you manage to do a dodge at the right time. But I was never able to figure either of these out. I mean, I could figure out the Unite Guts pretty well because, frankly, you don't have to do it at a very specific time. It lasts for like a second or two, which isn't much, but you still have a fair amount of breathing room. Dodging I couldn't figure out to save my life. But yes, the amount of attacks that can go right through a Unite Guts, and then the amount of attacks that can just be blocked by the Unite Guts and thrown backwards is ridiculous, and it's impossible to tell. You'll have attacks that will come down on top of your head that will be like, there's no way I'll be able to Unite Guts this, but you hit it anyway and it works. And then you get an attack that looks about as heavy, and it just goes right through, crushes you, and takes away a bit of your health. And there are a lot of attacks that can't figure out for the life of them whether or not they're meant to be dodged or blocked. And alongside having trouble with drawing everything, and it turns the entirety of the combat into a weird mess where it doesn't feel like anything is particularly right. It isn't helped by the fact like the Wonderliner gets blocked by everything from walls to enemies to pits off edges or anything like that. It starts out really slow too, which means you actually have a bit of trouble getting out the relatively bigger shapes, which means bigger weapons, which means more damage over a larger area. You have a lot of trouble actually getting them working, and then they give you an upgrade right away, which makes you draw them a lot faster, which makes you realize that they've just blocked in everything with walls to make you not do as much effort as humanly possible in order to actually get this stuff drawn. And it just makes it really frustrating, because you've got, like, little gaps here that you need to, like, fill with circles in order to recruit these people. You've got these little doors that you need to send dudes in, which I could not for the life of me hit in the first two chapters. In this chapter, chapter 3, I was able to get, like, the 2 times that I saw it happen to work perfectly. And I was thinking to myself, what the fuck? How is it that when I turn the recording on, it decides to actually behave and let me actually hit the target? And there are a lot of situations like this, where the Wonderliner just doesn't draw accurately, so you'll be spending a bunch of time drawing a shape, realizing that it didn't recognize the shape you're going for, cancelling, trying again, realizing that the accuracy on this is shit, and you finally get it on like the 4th time, at which point the enemy has decided to move on anyway, so your Unite is kind of useless, because you find yourself needing to either dodge or just move towards them, which actually reduces the built-in time limit on them. And with the built-in time limit, that means you don't get to hold on to any particular one for very long, and you have to deal with your Unite charge, which is your energy bar up the top there. And it means that you can't be consistently swapping your morphs. And to be fair, this is relatively understandable, but considering the amount of times I've accidentally hit the button to get a Unite morph out, just because at the absolute very last second I could have perceived it. Like, I'm not even second, like millisecond, I could have perceived it. The shape that I'd drawn changed entirely, and I ended up spawning with something entirely different. And this is the sort of game where if you bring along like a whip to fight off one of the giant armored turtles, it'll just bounce right off. You need to use the specific attack for the specific purpose, right? So getting it wrong means that you have to go to the effort of building another one, and you've lost Unite charge, which means that you're not going to be able to do as many blocks, parries, dodges, or you're not going to be able to do as many blocks, parries, dodges, or anything else. So after a couple of these mistakes, which the game is definitely responsible for because the accuracy of this liner is fucking shithouse, you'll be out of Unite energy, and you'll have to wait for it to charge up again. This is also multiplied by a few other problems that the game has, mainly the camera. It is an isometric, fixed perspective camera. You can zoom it in and zoom it out, but only in specific situations. So you'll find yourself in positions where the camera will zoom in so close when you get attacked and then not zoom back out again, so you can't see what the fuck is going on. So you'll zoom out, and once you've zoomed out, you'll be able to see a lot more of the arena, but then some really weird effects start happening. Like there's a bunch of depth of field that'll appear all over the place. There's some really flashy stuff that'll block out the smaller enemies, and a lot of them will just go off screen and start attacking you. And with the absolute cacophony of sounds that are going on in this game, at every single moment, with how loud the soundtrack is, with how your footsteps on the ground make such loud noises, and with how, like, the sounds of the Wonderliner and the summons make really loud noises, you can't hear things like audible enemy tells until they've already shot you. And it's just bizarre, because you just stand there and get hit repeatedly. It's what eventually made me give up on making this footage at about the hour-long mark. I'm just sitting there, and I'm like, oh man, I don't want to do this anymore. I just spent so much time getting whiffed by something that was off screen that I couldn't hear because it's too fucking quiet in comparison to everything else. There's no off-screen warning that they're about to attack you. It's just a gigantic laser beam that just flies in and wipes the floor with you because fuck this game. But anyway, as I was saying, the camera zooms in really far, and you have to manually remember to zoom it out all the time, because there are multiple secrets in this game that will require you to have the camera zoomed out so that you can see them. It just drives me nuts, because you have to remember every single time, okay, I have to zoom out now to make sure there's nothing that I'll miss. Okay, I have to zoom in now because I'm about to go into another one of these things that is like a dual screen thing. Okay, I'm about to get into a bloody scrolling shooting section, or an into-the-screen shooting section on rails, mostly. And it's just pathetically easy. Like, I'm playing on the normal difficulty. You don't get hard, or what I assume is very hard. I assume until you beat the game. And on normal, these, like, scrolling shooter sections are so easy, boring, and one-dimensional that I would get bored during them. I wouldn't even be bothered with them. I just, like, okay, let's do this now. There is one thing the Platinum is supposed to be good at, and that's spectacle. But every, like, big spectacle moment that I've seen in these games are such boring quick-time events that they put pretty much... They put every other, like, quick-time event a step above them, just because they're so simple. There are also times that you have to draw with the Wonderliner in the first chapter, where you have to deal with the slow version, that are actually pretty tense, if you want to see as you can get it as high as you possibly can. But once you get into chapter 2 and you've got the sped up Wonderliner, it's so easy that I don't see the point. You might as well just make it a cutscene. Well, at least the port runs well, but considering the fact that it's like a 7-year-old game running on a PC, yeah, I can kind of understand why it would run relatively well, although, as I said before, the PC port is kind of screwed with its frame limiter. Yeah, as you can see, like, I don't know if I'm going to be timing this exactly how I did it, but the textures on that guy's face were just really rough. And how the hell would I supposed to be able to tell, like, what I was drawing there beyond, like, the first 10 people? The camera was just so zoomed in. That was absolutely ridiculous. Also, good luck trying to do, like, Unite morphs in, like, certain directions. Like the bloody hammer, where you have to draw a straight line and then a circle. Imagine doing that on another angle. This is what I mean when I say enemies block you is a real problem, because they can block you from drawing the line with your Unite morphs. So if you want to get like a hammer, you have to do it behind you, or you have to do it downwards into a corner. And it's so frustrating. There are some other mechanics going on, but none of them are really particularly memorable. Like, you've got a rank system that goes up. Every individual character that you can pick up, of which there are, of course, 100. Every individual character that you can pick up has their own unique rank, and the more that you use the weapon attuned to their rank, the more that they'll level up. And the more ranks that you have, the more things you'll get, like extra health, You'll get bits of information, you'll get statues, whatever, which are also collectibles hidden in the levels, quite well, I might add. You'll really need to go to a fair bit of effort to get them. There is also a crafting system where you can craft together space potatoes, carrots, and eggplants, I think it is. Which is bizarre. Well, like, what a weird 3 choices, but okay. And if you put enough of them together, you can make things like health items and what have you. But the only item that's even remotely worth having is the item that lets you buy any item for the shop for free if you combine 30 of each fruit. I don't know why you would bother going to the effort of crafting anything else. You know, what else is there? There is a dual screen mode that you can use to try and get, like, the second screen on screen without covering the thing, but it's also just incredibly awkward and it just makes you wish they bothered to implement everything from the second screen in the first screen instead. Well, hell, maybe put a port of the game on the 3DS. That might actually work with the stylus. What else is there? The overall combat, I'm not very satisfied with either. It's got the same problem that most of Platinum games have, where it feels more along the lines of just the most lightweight thing you've ever encountered. Even, like, I've been playing Sengoku Basara again for a project which I'll tell you about sometime next week, depending on the result. And it has so much impact to all of its weaponry, but this game, outside of stuff like the Wonder Hammer, where it's so bloody obvious that it just like wrecks people when it comes down, it's just so lightweight that I just don't feel like I like it. And it's not helped out by the fact that there are certain bosses in the game that can use the same abilities that you do. And you can attack them and they won't flinch at all, but if they manage to get so much as one hit on you, you'll not only get hurt and knocked back, but your Wonder Unite, whatever it is, will just get knocked out of your hands and you'll have to make a new one. It just doesn't feel fair. And as a result, with all of these things I've mentioned, the camera going freaking crazy and not being able to keep track of everything, the Wonderliner being an absolute bitch to handle to the point where I ended up screaming at the damn thing to do the right shape or I'm going to delete the fucking game off my hard drive. The lack of proper telegraphing so that you have no freaking idea whether or not you're supposed to block or dodge specific attacks. There's just so much wrong with it. The list is just ridiculous. It's not a good port. They didn't bother going to the effort of actually adapting it to a single screen game. They literally just took the laziest route possible and made it so that it's just an extra screen that you have to activate using the back button on the controller. Why would you even think of doing that? And they're calling it remastered when it's very clearly just a port. And I hate it. I honestly hate it. For the reasons that I've been ranting to you for the past 23 minutes. I will admit that once everything gets going, the game does look good. It's got a good sense of style to it. It's a little bit too clean for my tastes maybe, but it looks alright. But again, thanks to the fact that there's a bunch of ridiculous effects going on, like ridiculous use of depth of field, way too many bright colors and what have you, it just gets really distracting and hard to actually pay attention to what's going on screen. And of course the PC port isn't very good at all. You can't customize very much, and in order to keep the frame rate stable you need to have a bloody patch from an outside developer who managed to get the early build of the game on Kickstarter and managed to make a patch 3 days before it officially came out. It's impressive. It's impressive at just how little effort they seem to have put into it. How much money did they make for this Kickstarter? How much money? Surely they could have gone to at least a little bit of effort. I can understand where you might have to drop some things, but they had item usage working pretty well. So, you would see it in the top right corner of the main screen. That was fine. Why not make it so that you could turn on, a radar that points out where all of, your friends' enemies are around the outside? Just, little triangles and little, danger signs for the enemies that are about to throw out an attack that you can't see. And why couldn't they have made it so that everything worked on at least, like, one screen? I mean, it wouldn't have taken a massive amount of effort. It would have taken some, but... yeah. I'm sorry, I'm sick of it. I'm done. I don't want anything more to do with it. I don't like the way it handles. I don't like the way it plays. I don't like how some of it looks. The humor of the cutscenes is alright at times and absolutely cringeworthy at others. And I have no reason to keep playing. I'm never going to look at this game in my library again once this video is done, which is right now, because frankly, I'm pretty sure I've said everything I need to say about it. This has been Blue Maxima. I'll let the rest of this footage play out. I'll see you all next time.
have been better.
Energy converter. Wonderful parfait. Roger!
Commander Nelson, enemy reinforcements approaching. I'm reading 12 carriers and 200 assault UFOs.
They're gonna swarm the Virgin Victory!
Hold on! We will be left without escape!
Gun stations, open fire. Shoot down those hostiles and defend the Virgin Victory.
Wonder Jump!
Wonder Jump! Wonder Jump! Wonder Jump! Thunder Jump! Ha!